Ever wished you could just, like, hit reset on society
Yeah.
and build it back better, way better?
Mm.
Well, today we're diving into the mind of someone who did just that,
Oh, okay.
Plato.
Right.
Get ready for some seriously thought-provoking ideas from his masterpiece, The Republic.
It's a classic for a reason.
Right.
The Republic grapples with some, timeless questions
Mm.
about justice, art, and the ideal state. Questions that are still relevant even today.
Oh, absolutely. And we are going straight to the source for this deep dive
Okay.
with excerpts from The Republic itself. So you'll be hearing Plato's ideas. In his own words, buckle up. You're about to explore a world of philosopher-kings,
Oh, wow.
noble lies, and even a radical take on gender equality.
Interesting.
That was way ahead of its time. But first, a little context.
Okay.
The Republic is written as a dialogue.
Right.
With Socrates, yes, that Socrates is our main character.
Okay.
He's on a quest to understand the true meaning of justice, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole. He engages in these deep conversations with a fascinating cast of characters,
Interesting.
each representing different viewpoints
Okay.
and challenging him to think deeply.
I see.
Okay, so picture this. Socrates is hanging out to the house of this wealthy elder named Cephalus.
Right.
They get to talking about wealth and aging. And Cephalus drops this intriguing idea. Money doesn't guarantee happiness.
Right.
He even throws in this clever anecdote about Themistocles,
Oh.
the Athenian general. Apparently, this guy from the tiny island of Seriphos was trying to diss Themistocles, saying he was only famous because he was Athenian, not because of any real merit.
Okay.
Themistocles, being the sharp guy that he was, shot back, well, if you were born in Athens or I on Seriphos, neither of us would be famous.
Oh, wow.
Mic drop.
Exactly. It's a brilliant way of saying that circumstances matter, but it's ultimately what you do with your opportunities that defines you. And Cephalus uses this story to highlight that true happiness comes from within, not from external factors like wealth.
Deep stuff, right?
Yeah.
But Socrates, being Socrates, wants to go even deeper.
Of course.
He shifts the conversation to the true nature of professions.
Okay.
What makes a good doctor, a good pilot?
Right.
He uses these examples to make a point that resonates even today.
Yeah.
He argues that true professionals prioritize the well-being
Yeah.
of those they serve,
Right.
not just their own personal gain. So a doctor's focus
Okay.
should be on the patient's health, not just maximizing profits.
Right.
A pilot's responsibility is the safety of the passengers, not showing off fancy flying skills.
Makes sense.
It's like their professional duty trumps personal interest,
Yeah.
which makes you wonder, how often does that actually happen?
It's a question worth asking, especially when we consider professions that hold immense power.
Right.
Doctors,
Yeah.
teachers, politicians. Are they truly acting in the best interests of the people they serve?
That's a good question.
And this leads Socrates to another intriguing point, the nature of leadership itself.
Okay.
He suggests that in a truly just society, the most capable people wouldn't be fighting for positions of power.
Oh.
They'd see ruling as a responsibility, a burden even, not a chance to grab power and enrich themselves.
Wait, so in this ideal world, good people would try to avoid being in charge?
That's the idea.
Wow.
They'd be motivated by duty, not by personal ambition. Makes you think, doesn't it? Are the people clamoring for power today truly the ones best suited to wield it?
Food for thought.
Yeah.
But hold on. Things are about to get really interesting.
Right.
Plato introduces a concept that's sure to spark some debate.
Okay.
The noble lie. So here's the gist. Plato suggests that sometimes. A carefully crafted lie. A noble one. I'll be necessary. For the stability and harmony of the state. This particular lie would convince citizens that they were born from the earth, bound to their fellow citizens as brothers. So he's basically saying it's okay to lie to people if it's for the greater good. That's bold.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
And this idea is closely tied to his views on censorship,
Okay.
particularly when it comes to art. Plato believed that certain types of poetry and storytelling could be harmful to the state, especially those depicting the gods in negative ways. And he believed that they should be censored.
Whoa. Censorship. Would Plato get canceled on Twitter for that today?
It's certainly a controversial topic, but for Plato, it was all about shaping a society where citizens were guided by reason
Okay.
and virtue.
Right.
This leads us to his ideas about education.
Right.
He had some very specific thoughts on how young minds should be molded. Music and gymnastics, he believed, were key to developing strong character.
So it's not just about hitting the gym and learning to play an instrument.
Right. Gymnastics for Plato encompassed everything from physical training
Right.
to developing courage and discipline. Music was about cultivating harmony and balance in the soul. He even had this radical idea that a good soul actually leads to a good body, challenging the conventional wisdom of his time.
Fascinating. It's like he understood the mind-body connection centuries before modern science caught up.
He was ahead of his time in many ways, but remember, our big question here is justice.
Right, right.
How does all of this relate back to that core concept?
Okay, right. What does music and gymnastics have to do with justice?
Well, Plato makes this intriguing connection between justice in the individual and justice in the state.
Okay.
He uses this analogy of zooming out to look at a larger entity, the state, to better understand a smaller one, the individual soul.
So by understanding how justice works on a societal level, we can gain insights into how it operates within each of us.
Precisely. And to further understand this, Plato introduces us to his idea of the tripartite soul.
Tripartite soul. Okay, that sounds complicated. Break it down for me.
It's actually quite simple. Plato believed that the human soul has three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Think of it as three different voices in your head.
Okay.
The voice of logic, the voice of emotion, and the voice of desire, all competing for control.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So reason is the logical part of us.
Yeah.
Spirit is our drive and ambition. And appetite is our basic desires for things like food, pleasure.
You got it. And achieving temperance, in Plato's view, is all about making sure that reason is the one calling the shots, keeping the other two in check. It's like a chariot driver trying to control those wild horses.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
It's an internal battle sometimes.
It is. So how does this tripartite soul connect to justice?
Right.
Both personally and on a societal level?
Right.
Well, Plato argues that when each part of the soul is fulfilling its proper function and reason is in control, that's when an individual is just. And when a state is organized in a way that reflects this inner harmony, with each class performing its role and wise rulers guiding the way, that's when you have a just society.
So it's all about balance and order.
Yeah.
Both within ourselves and in the way society is structured.
Exactly. But Plato doesn't stop there.
Oh.
He takes this idea of justice and applies it to another area that was pretty radical for his time.
Okay.
Gender equality.
Wait, didn't he believe women could be guardians too? Like seriously, warrior women leading the state.
He did. He argued that within the guardian class, women with the right abilities should have the same opportunities as men, including training, education, and even leadership roles.
Whoa. That was a pretty wild idea for his time.
It was.
And it still sparks debate today. What did he think about family life for these guardians?
To make this work, Plato proposed some unconventional ideas, like communal child-rearing and shared living arrangements. He essentially wanted to abolish the nuclear family as we know it.
Imagine trying to explain that at a family reunion. But seriously, was he onto something, or was this idea just way too radical? We'll be back to explore that in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back. Last time we left off with Plato's radical proposal.
Women in the guardian class, living communally, raising children together. Talk about shaking things up.
It was a bold vision, aimed at creating guardians who were utterly devoted to the state, free from the distractions and potential conflicts of traditional family ties.
But could it actually work? I mean, it's one thing to say that philosophers should rule, but to completely upend family structures, that's a huge leap.
Plato recognized the challenges. He argued that for a system like this to thrive, it would need a society that truly valued wisdom and justice above all else. It's almost as if he envisioned a society preconditioned to embrace these radical ideas.
So it's not just about implementing these ideas, it's about having the right cultural foundation for them to take root.
Exactly. And this brings us back to Plato's emphasis on education. He believed that carefully nurturing young minds, instilling a love of truth and a deep understanding of justice, could create a generation receptive to even the most unconventional ideas.
It's like planting a seed. You need the right soil, the right conditions for it to grow. But even then, Plato acknowledged that no system, no matter how well designed, is immune to decline.
Right.
Remember those 5 forms of government he outlined?
Yes.
Aristocracy, timocracy, oligarchy, democracy, and finally, tyranny.
Right.
It's like this downward spiral, each system ultimately leading to the downfall of the next.
It's a cautionary tale, reminding us that even the most ideal societies need constant vigilance. We can't just establish justice and then sit back and relax. We have to actively safeguard those principles to prevent corruption from creeping in.
So it's not enough to build a just society.
Yeah.
We have to constantly maintain it.
Precisely. And this is where Plato's analysis of tyranny becomes especially relevant. He paints a vivid and somewhat disturbing picture of the tyrant's psyche, driven by insatiable desires, consumed by fear and paranoia.
It's like they're trapped in their own personal hell.
Right.
All that power,
Right.
and yet utterly miserable.
That's the point Plato is driving at. Tyranny isn't just a bad form of government. It reflects a deeply flawed state of being, a soul that is fundamentally at odds with justice and true happiness.
So a tyrant isn't just a bad ruler. They're a bad person, period.
In Plato's view, yes. The tragedy of the tyrant is that their relentless pursuit of power and pleasure leads them to a state of isolation and misery. They're chasing a satisfaction they'll never find.
It's a stark contrast to the philosopher-king,
Right.
who embodies reason and seeks the good of all.
Exactly. And this highlights Plato's belief in the importance of reason and temperance. He argues that the only way to achieve true happiness, both individually and as a society, is to live a life guided by reason, to control our desires rather than letting them control us. It's that internal battle we were discussing earlier. With the tripartite soul, the tyrant lets their appetites run wild while the philosopher-king keeps reason firmly at the reins.
Makes you wonder, is that why philosophers might hesitate to rule? It's a huge responsibility, trying to guide an entire society towards reason and justice.
It is. But Plato argued it was a necessary burden, without the guidance of those who can see beyond the shadows, those who understand the true nature of the good. Society is doomed to repeat the cycle of decline and corruption.
So it's a call to action then. A challenge for those who have the capacity for deep thought and wisdom to step up and lead the way.
You could see it that way. While the concept of philosopher-kings might seem like an ancient Greek fantasy, the questions Plato raises about leadership, justice, and the pursuit of a good life are as relevant as ever.
They definitely make you think about the kind of leaders we have today, the values we prioritize, and the role each of us can play in creating a more just and harmonious world.
Exactly. And it's worth remembering that Plato's Republic isn't just about lofty ideals, it also delves into the very practical challenges of governing. He proposed some rather unconventional ideas about how these philosopher-kings should live, including...
Oh yeah, that whole communal living thing.
Right.
No private property, no individual families. It's definitely one of the most controversial aspects of the Republic.
It is. But it's important to understand why Plato proposed this. He believed that by removing private property and traditional family ties from the equation, the guardians would be free from the distractions and temptations that often lead to corruption.
They'd be 100% dedicated to the good of the state, not their own personal interest.
Precisely. While it might seem like a utopian fantasy, it highlights a fundamental tension that exists in any society: the balance between individual desires and the common good.
It's that age-old question.
Yeah.
How do we create a system that allows individuals to thrive while also ensuring the well-being of the whole?
Exactly. And Plato's Republic, while not without its flaws and controversial elements, gives us a framework for tackling these complex issues, a framework that continues to challenge and inspire us centuries later.
Okay, so we've covered philosopher-kings, those 5 forms of government,
Right.
the allegory of the cave. But before we wrap up this deep dive into the Republic, we need to circle back to one key concept: the tripartite soul.
Ah, yes. The three-part soul: reason, spirit, and appetite. It's a model for understanding not just individual psychology, but also the dynamics of justice at a societal level.
Right. We touched on it earlier.
Yeah.
But let's dive a little deeper. So remind me, how does this tripartite soul connect to justice?
Plato believed that when each part of the soul is functioning as it should,
Okay.
with reason as the guiding force, that's when an individual is just. And when the state is structured in a way that reflects this internal harmony,
Hmm.
each class performing its role, that's when you have a just society.
Okay, I'm following. So let's break down each part of this soul a little more.
Okay.
Reason. That's the part of us that thinks things through, makes logical decisions.
Precisely. Reason is what allows us to seek knowledge and truth, to make judgments based on logic and ethics, to control our impulses and act in accordance with what is right.
Got it. What about spirit?
Spirit is our drive,
Okay.
our ambition, our sense of honor and courage. It's what pushes us to achieve, to overcome challenges, to stand up for our beliefs.
And then there's appetite, which is, well, pretty self-explanatory, right?
Indeed. Appetite encompasses all our basic desires for things like food, drink, pleasure, comfort. It's the part of us that seeks immediate gratification.
We all know that part of ourselves pretty well.
We do. And the key, according to Plato, is to ensure that reason is the one steering the ship, so to speak.
Yeah.
Keeping spirit and appetite in check.
Right, because if we let those desires run wild, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Exactly. This is where the concept of temperance comes in. For Plato, temperance isn't about denying our desires altogether. It's about finding a balance, a harmony between the different parts of the soul.
So it's not about becoming some kind of emotionless robot.
No.
It's about ensuring our actions are guided by reason and wisdom.
Precisely. And this idea of balance and harmony within the soul is reflected in Plato's vision for the ideal state. He believes society should be structured to mirror the tripartite soul, with each class fulfilling its specific function.
Okay, so how does that work? How do these different parts of the soul translate to different social classes?
Well, for Plato, the guardians, those philosopher-kings we discussed, represent reason. They've developed their rational faculties to the fullest, driven by a love of wisdom and a desire to serve the common good.
Makes sense. They're the ones making those wise decisions, guiding the ship of state.
Exactly. And then you have the auxiliaries, the warrior class, who represent spirit. They possess courage, discipline, a strong sense of duty. Their role is to protect the state, both from external threats and internal disorder.
So they're the ones putting those wise decisions into action, defending the state and keeping things running smoothly.
Precisely. And finally, you have the producers, the craftspeople, farmers, merchants, all those who provide for the material needs of society. They represent appetite, the desire for basic necessities and material gain.
So everyone has a role to play, even those who aren't philosophers or warriors.
Absolutely. A just society, for Plato, is one where each of these classes is fulfilling its purpose, working in harmony just like in a well-ordered soul.
It's like a giant, intricate machine, where all the ears have to be working together perfectly.
That's a great analogy. And when one part of that machine starts to malfunction, the whole system can be thrown off balance.
Right, like if the guardians become corrupt, or the auxiliaries get power-hungry, the whole state could start to crumble.
Exactly. That's why Plato placed so much emphasis on wise and just rulers, those who could ensure that each part of society was functioning correctly, with reason always at the helm.
Okay, so we've got this whole framework of the tripartite soul, how it connects to justice on both a personal and societal level. But what does it all mean for us today?
Right.
Living in the 21st century. What's a takeaway message?
That's a great question. I think one of the most enduring lessons from the Republic is that justice isn't just about laws and institutions. It's about our internal state as well. It's about cultivating wisdom, reason, and temperance within ourselves.
So finding that balance between our own desires and the common good. It's like what we were saying earlier about the tyrant versus the philosopher-king. It's a choice we all make on a personal level every day.
Exactly. While Plato's vision of a perfect society might seem unattainable, his emphasis on education, leadership, and the pursuit of truth is incredibly relevant to our world today.
It really does make you think about the kind of leaders we choose, the values we uphold, the ways we can each contribute to a more just and harmonious world.
Speaking of understanding the world, we can't wrap up without revisiting the allegory of the cave.
Right.
That image of escaping the darkness, seeing the world illuminated by the sun, the idea of the good, it's such a powerful metaphor for the pursuit of knowledge.
It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to understand, that the journey towards truth can be challenging, but ultimately it's so rewarding. And it's a journey we each undertake individually as well. Remember the tripartite soul, that internal struggle between reason, spirit, and appetite. We all experience that.
We do, and Plato's message about finding balance, Letting reason guide our actions is something we can all apply in our own lives.
It's about making choices that align with our values, about striving to become the best versions of ourselves. So after this deep dive into the Republic, what stands out to you? What will you take away from Plato's work?
What strikes me is that even though Plato was outlining an ideal state, he wasn't naive about human nature. He recognized that power corrupts, that societies can decline, that even the best intentions can go awry.
He wasn't offering some simple solution, some utopian blueprint.
Right.
He was pushing us to think critically about the challenges we face, both as individuals and as a society.
Exactly. And I think that's why the Republic continues to resonate with us today. It's not just a philosophical treatise, it's a conversation starter, an invitation to engage in that ongoing dialogue about justice, truth, and the good life.
Well said. And on that note, it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the Republic. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Plato believed that philosophers were best suited to rule. But in today's world, would a true philosopher even want to rule? And if they did, could they actually make a positive difference? Let us know what you think.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's time to wrap up our journey into Plato's Republic.
Yeah, what a journey it's been.
Yeah.
From philosopher-kings to the allegory of the cave. Plato packed this work with ideas that have resonated for centuries.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
But even so, we have explored some massive themes: justice, the ideal state, the role of art in education, that whole tripartite soul concept.
Right.
And let's not forget those controversial bits.
The noble lie. Communal living for guardians. And women warriors. Plato definitely wasn't shy about challenging the status quo.
Not at all. But what strikes me is how relevant the Republic feels, even today, over 2,000 years after it was written.
It is remarkable, isn't it? The questions Plato raises about leadership, the nature of truth, the tension between individual desires and the common good. These are like timeless dilemmas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We may not be aiming for a society ruled by philosopher-kings,
Right.
but the idea of leaders who are wise, just, and genuinely committed to serving the people, well, that's something we can all get behind, right?
It is. And Plato's emphasis on education, not just for practical skills,
Right.
but for shaping character and nurturing a love of learning, feels more relevant than ever in our information-saturated world.
It really does make you think about what we should be teaching our kids, how to encourage critical thinking, how to foster that genuine desire to understand the world around us. Speaking of understanding the world, we can't wrap up without revisiting the allegory of the cave. That image of escaping the darkness, seeing the world illuminated by the sun, the idea of the good, it's such a powerful metaphor for the pursuit of knowledge.
It is. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to understand, that the journey towards truth can be challenging, but ultimately it's so rewarding, and it's a journey we each undertake individually as well. Remember that tripartite soul, that internal struggle between reason, spirit, and appetite.
Yeah.
We all experience that.
We do. And Plato's message about finding balance, letting reason guide our actions, is something we can all apply in our own lives.
It's about making choices that align with our values, about striving to become the best versions of ourselves. So after this deep dive into the Republic, what stands out to you? What will you take away from Plato's work?
What strikes me is that even though Plato was outlining an ideal state, he wasn't naive about human nature. He recognized that power corrupts, that societies can decline, that even the best intentions can go awry.
He wasn't offering some simple solution, some utopian blueprint. He was pushing us to think critically about the challenges we face, both as individuals and as a society.
Exactly. And I think that's why the Republic continues to resonate with us today. It's not just a philosophical treatise, it's a conversation starter, an invitation to engage in that ongoing dialogue about justice, truth, and the good life.
Well said. And on that note, it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the Republic. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Plato believed that philosophers were best suited to rule. But in today's world, would a true philosopher even want to rule? And if they did, could they actually make a positive difference? Let us know what you think.